welcome to Chasing Truth, a show produced for those who love and deeply value the truth. Today's topic, the purpose of head coverings in Pauline theology. This is a very controversial subject, especially today in which, everything's being redefined, all the genders are being blurred. It's just kind of a mix and match, and it just seems like everything in terms of what we've understood is crumbling all around us. This is a kind of pointed response to that and a call to come back to that which is within the design of God as it relates to men and women. So, of course, controversial, but exciting to say the least. I think you're going to enjoy this. And at the end of the show, of course, we'll have some links for you so you can look more in depth at this, and also some tutorials where you can go and see what head coverings look like today and how to even wrap your own wraps in terms of head coverings. So we're going to start with 1 Corinthians chapter 11, and this is primarily going to deal with women's head coverings. We might do another show on coverings for men. Traditionally, that looks like the kippah for those that are familiar with that, but today we're going to focus mostly on women and women's head coverings. So 1 Corinthians chapter 11, I'm going to be reading from the Amplified Bible, the Classic Edition. And I think you'll enjoy this particular translation in regard to the subject matter. Now, the overall reason that Paul gives, and as you come down through this passage with me, you'll see it. The overall reason is that there is an actual order in creation, a design within creation that has an order to it that is to be reflected in who we are as men and women, as male and female. It should be reflected in our dress. The very things that are tied into this design, our purpose, our roles, etc., are to be reflected symbolically in terms of how we dress. And so let's jump into the passage. I'm going to go right to verse number 3. Paul's speaking here. He says, I want you to know and realize that Christ is the head of every man. The head of a woman is her husband, and the head of Christ is God. So right away, we're dealing with headship, this concept of head or headship, which is tied into authority, not just source, not just origin, but authority. And what we learn here is that everyone's called to be in authority and under authority. We'll look at this a little bit later, but if you want to just take note, Christ is the head of every man. A man is called to be in submission to Christ, and the head of a woman is her husband. And even the head of Christ, is called to be in submission to his Father, the God who created all things seen and unseen. Let's jump down to verse 4. Any man who prays or prophesies, teaches, refutes, reproves, admonishes, comforts, with his head covered, dishonors his head, Christ. Now, I want you to think through this with me. One of the rules in hermeneutics is that you cannot interpret a passage in such a way that it contradicts other clear teachings in the Word of God. So when it says that a man who prays with his head covered dishonors Christ, what kind of covering is Paul referring to? Because obviously God commanded the priesthood, which was male, to cover their heads while serving and ministering to his people. So God himself commanded the entire priesthood to wear coverings. In fact, those coverings were convex shaped caps, if you will, which kind of relate and are similar to kippahs that are worn today. And so surely Paul isn't saying that a man wearing a kippah dishonors Messiah, especially in light of the fact that they were commanded to wear these in the Tanakh period. So he must be talking about a man covering his head in a way that's different than what we find in the Tanakh as it relates to head coverings. We'll go on. We'll explore this in just a moment. Verse 5. And any woman who publicly prays or prophesies, teaches, refutes, reproves, admonishes, or comforts when she is bareheaded, dishonors her head, her husband. It is the same as if her head were shaved. For if a woman will not wear a head covering, then she should cut off her hair too. But if it is disgraceful for a woman to have her head shorn or shaven, let her cover her head. The idea here in this Greek word that we translate as covering, it's really in reference to a woman putting something over her hair, that she's to cover her hair with something that comes down over and covers. In fact, the Greek word that we translate covering is actually from two words, literally meaning to come down over and to cover. So it needs to come down over and to cover. An example of this would be a shawl or a scarf, something that's used to come over the hair of a woman and to cover the hair of a woman. That's what the Greek word here is conveying. Verse 7, for a man ought not to wear anything on his head in church, for he is the image and reflected glory of God. His function of governing reflects the majesty of the divine rule. But a woman is the expression of man's glory, majesty, and preeminence. Again, this cannot be in reference to a kippah. When it says a man should not wear anything on his head, it certainly cannot mean kippah, because that was actually what God had commanded them to wear. What he's saying must be in reference to men wearing coverings like women, to put a shawl on their head, something that comes down and covers their hair like a woman covers her hair. Keep in mind that this whole issue of gender dysphoria celebration that we see today, it didn't start with this. It's nothing new. It goes all the way back to the earliest civilizations. And Paul certainly is trying to address it within his culture in his day, which was influenced heavily by the Greeks. And there was plenty of gender bending in that day. So let me read from another translation. This is the respected Greek scholar Kenneth Woost, who clarifies what this meaning is in his expanded Greek text. It says, a man ought not to wear, quote unquote, a shawl hanging down over his head like a woman. A male should not cover his head in that manner, unquote. In what manner? In the manner that a woman does. A man is not to cover his head like women covers their heads. This would be an abridgment of the design of God. And so Kenneth Woost in his translation, I think, hits the home run. Really what Paul's talking about is men cross-dressing. Of course, that was forbidden in the Tanakh. We find that in the Torah and later in the Tanakh, the idea that men should dress like men, women should dress like women. So what's emerging in Paul's teaching here is that men and women are equal in worth, though different in attributes and role assignments, and therefore should reflect those differences, those distinctions in how they dress. And the head covering is one of those examples. Men should look and dress like men. Women should look and dress like women. A woman's head covering should be different and distinct from the kind of coverings that men are commanded to wear, or at least the priesthood was commanded to wear. In short, no cross-dressing or blurring of the lines of biological gender. This is the issue that Paul's getting at. Verse 8, for man was not created from woman, but woman from man. Neither was a man created on account of or for the benefit of woman, but woman on account of and for the benefit of man. Therefore, she should be subject to his authority and should have a covering on her head as a token, a symbol of her submission to authority, that she may show reverence as do the angels and do not displease them, and not to displease them. So what we have here is this whole issue of a woman's head covering is a symbol of her authority, of her embracing the design of God, the hierarchy of authority within creation. This is God's design. It's a hierarchy of authority, and everyone is to be in authority and under authority. Women have authority, and they're called to be in authority or under authority. Men too, likewise. We have authority, but we're also called to be in submission to authority, namely Christ. So everyone is called to be in authority and under authority, and the way we dress and the symbols that we have are to convey those ideas. So again, cross-dressing begins to undermine this hierarchy and leads to an egalitarian model which almost always destroys our distinctions as men and women, our roles and designs as men and women, and husbands and wives. This is what I believe that Paul is trying to address within the Corinthian church. Verse 11, nevertheless, in the plan of the Lord and from his point of view, woman is not apart from and independent of man, nor is man aloof from and independent of woman. For as a woman was made from man, even so man is also born of woman. And all, whether male or female, go forth from God as their author. Again, we are equal as men and women, male and female. We are equal in origin and in worth. Both are created in the image of God, but both have attributes and role assignments that differ from one another. Verse 13, consider for yourselves, is it proper and decent, according to your customs, for a woman to offer prayer to God publicly with her head uncovered? Does not the native sense of propriety, experience, common sense, reason itself teach you that for a man to wear long hair is a dishonor, humiliating and degrading to him? But if a woman has long hair, it is an ornament and glory, for her hair is given to her for a covering. Very important to note this. In the Greek, this word that we translate covering is actually different than what we saw earlier in the text. In the 6 previous times that we find the word covering, it's in reference to a shawl or a scarf coming down over her and covering her hair. This time, the English word covering is actually based on a different Greek word than the previous 6. This time, in this verse, the word covering is from an entirely different Greek word, meaning to come down around the perimeter. For example, the long hair of a woman is given as a glorious border or perimeter that surrounds the beauty of her face, accentuates the beauty of her face. Again, Greek scholar Kenneth Woost, in his expanded Greek translation, clarifies this. Let me give it to you, just verbatim. Quote, does not the innate sense of propriety itself, based upon the objective difference in the constitution of things, the difference between the male and the female, teach you that if indeed a man allows his hair to grow long, it is a disgrace to him. But if a woman allows her hair to grow long, it is her glory, because her head of hair has been given to her as a permanent covering, answering in character to, but not a substitute for the shawl. In other words, this covering that she has, that is a perimeter around her face, is not a substitute for the shawl that comes down over and covers the hair. It's not a replacement for that. He finalizes his statements in verse 16. The Apostle Paul says this, now if anyone is disposed to be argumentative and contentious about this, we hold to and recognize no other custom in worship than this, nor do the churches of God generally. So, in summarizing this, men are to dress like men and women are to dress like women. There's a design of authority. It's reflected in our role assignments. It's also to be reflected in the symbols of our clothes. And this is to convey the idea that we are not only equal in worth and value, but we are different as well. We complement each other. Our attributes are complementary to one another, but there are distinctions in who we are as male and female. And our role assignments reflect that, as does our dress. So, if you're interested in a more in-depth teaching on this matter, please click on the link below and you can get into the details of this passage and the theology within Pauline teaching concerning head coverings. Just click the link below. And also, if you're interested in learning how to head cover as a woman, or learning different ways to head cover, please click the link below. We have some tutorials for you. I think you'll find it very exciting, interesting, and engaging. Well, that's it. Thank you for chasing truth with me on this passionate matter. Please subscribe to this channel, comment below, and if you have a chance, Check out all of our social media at graftedin.com. Thanks for joining me today.